Support for Starting Small comes from Human Scale, the leading designer and manufacturer of high-performance ergonomic products that help create a healthier work life. All of the products from chairs to standing desk and more are comfortable, easy to use, and sustainable, and great for either the office or the work-from-home environment. With an increase in shifting workplaces, comfort can be especially hard to find. As I run the podcast, I'm in front of my desk for hours a day, from scheduling, researching, interviewing, and more. Human Scale allows me to remain productive without the consequence of body stress to follow. Make sure to check out Human Scale at humanscale.com and use code StartingSmall at checkout to save 20% off your purchase. That's code StartingSmall at humanscale.com, and enjoy the episode. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small, a podcast about brand development, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the modern world. In this episode, I'm joined by Julie Smolyansky, CEO of Lifeway Foods, America's largest manufacturer of kefir. Julie's parents were Russian immigrants. They came to the U.S. and began making kefir in the basement of their home in Skokie, Illinois. While having massive success with Lifeway, Julie's father ended up passing away in 2002. This made Julie the youngest female CEO of a publicly held firm at age 27. Julie continued the company's growth and took them from $12 million to surpassing $120 million in annual revenue. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Julie Smolyansky of Lifeway Foods. Julie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I want to start out with your upbringing. So where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Sure. Well, it's an interesting story because my parents and I were refugees from the former Soviet Union, and we left through a small slit in the Iron Curtain and came to the United States and settled in Chicago in 1976 when I was just one. My parents came with $116 in their pocket, and they spoke no English. And it's kind of like a common shared immigrant experience. But especially in those early days when you're kind of the first of, trailblazing a path that other immigrants of your community aren't here yet. And we were the first of 48 families that were allowed to settle. So there weren't translation services. There were no friends. There was really no community of other Russian immigrants. So that's more challenging. But my parents were very entrepreneurial, and I kind of grew up watching them build their businesses, build a life. My mom, in the first 2 years, immediately saw that while there was a lot of ample food in the United States, she grew up in scarcity. Both her and my father grew up, it's like post-war, and Soviet Union kind of bread lines. So while there was scarcity in the Soviet Union, the food was still different. Whatever there was, it was different. And so she opened up the first Russian deli in Chicago. So, I grew up in the back of a deli grocery store, unpacking boxes, helping her, lay out food on the shelf and ringing up customers and, putting price tags on products and going to trade shows. I was a kid when I walked the first trade show floor and tried all these foods and watched, cool business deals happening. So that's kind of what started their entry into the food world. And about 9 years after their immigration process, and we're living in Chicago now, in 85, they went to Germany for another trade show, a food buying trade show. And my dad bought 3 bottles of kefir in the grocery store down there. And kefir is a staple in Soviet Union and Europe in general. It's a 2,000-year-old product that, people grew up drinking from the time they're born until they die, essentially, filled with folklore and storytelling and science and research. And it was a very storied product. But they noticed in the United States, kefir didn't exist. And yogurt itself was a very small, limited category, just almost non-existent, very much in its infancy, underdeveloped by leaps and bounds compared to European cultured food products, I'd say, in that category in Europe. And so, my dad said, well, America has everything, but it doesn't have kefir. And he kind of longed for it with a sense of nostalgia. And my mom looked at him and said, well, you're an engineer. He was a mechanical engineer. She said, you're an engineer. Why don't you design the plant, build it, and manufacture kefir, and I'll sell it in my distribution system. And at that point, she had already had a couple of delis, and she was importing and exporting food stuff all over the world, and New York and other places in the United States where the Russians were settling. So yeah, she had a distribution system. And so 6 months later, they incorporated Lifeway and started selling kefir into the marketplace in 86, and it took off. And I, was helping them just build their businesses. And I grew up kind of one foot in Russian community culture, kind of immigrants here in the States, in Chicago, and one foot in my American schools, in grade school and whatnot. And I certainly developed a couple of skill sets from that experience, but attending, when I remember vividly going to my first demo at the local grocery store here in Chicago and passing out kefir and, teaching people about it, telling the story of Lifeway and, kind of all that we were trying to do. And so that's kind of how my childhood was.
Wow. So going back to that, can you recall where your father first began to source ingredients for the kefir? So when he was first prototyping, do you know where you were sourcing at the time?
Yeah, I mean, he was able to, there's some kind of old sophisticated smuggling tactics, was able to bring the cultures from the Soviet Union, and then we were able to replicate it over and over again for the actual strain. So we have a very special strain that is kind of the original strain from my ancestors. And my ancestors in their gut intuitively kind of had the sense that they felt better when they consumed kefir, and they thought that it was a gift from the gods. They really considered it a gift from the gods, and Cleopatra bathed in it, and Marco Polo wrote about it. But the people, the ancestry from where I came from, those people lived past 100 years of age, and they attributed their longevity to their consumption of kefir. And it's just really exciting to see how research is kind of, starting to catch up to what they knew in their gut intuitively, that they felt better when kefir was a part of their diets. They were learning so much about gut health and the importance of having a diversified microflora and how the microbiome interacts with our kind of general health, from immunity, digestion, to now we are even learning about mental health. And it also just kind of overall gives us a sense of the importance of our food system, of the ingredients that we are using, and kind of where they're coming from, where we source things. Our milk, for example, is organic, and we have a line of organic. We have a line of grass-fed that we just recently launched. We have a line, our organic milk is from Amish farms in the Midwest. And so there's, a whole variety of kind of various sourcing process that we go through for our sourcing of ingredients. But yeah, the culture is very special. It's the Lifeway culture that is kind of continuing our legacy and heritage of from my family's origins in Eastern Europe.
Awesome. So you said shortly after the launch, the company blew up. So what do you think resulted in that? Was it marketing, or was it just the new product to the US, a retail opportunity, etc.?
Yeah, it was a combination of things, actually. It was a lot of really great factors that were working for us. For starters, politically, what was happening in pop culture was the kind of the tear down of the wall and the peace process happening between the Soviet Union and America, and Reagan and Gorbachev were meeting. And so there was a lot of media attention around Soviet Jews, about, Soviet immigrants, the Russians or, Ukrainians more so Russians and Soviets. And so my dad was getting, and Lifeway was getting a lot of attention. And Reagan, even the Reagan White House called Lifeway and said, we heard there's this Russian immigrant making this Russian product, this kefir. We'd like to, Reagan is heading over to Gorbachev to Moscow to meet with Gorbachev to talk about the peace process. And we'd like to bring him a case of your product to show him what his immigrants are doing and, tell him that he's losing, brain trust from people leaving the country and coming to our country with these gifts. And so, we want to help tear down the wall with it. We even have this really nice letter from Reagan that he said, thank you to Lifeway for being part of that process. So we were getting all this media attention. There was an article in Time magazine about it, and it just blew up. And at the same time, Whole Foods and, Wild Oats, which Whole Foods eventually bought, but all of these natural food co-ops and food stores were starting to open up, and natural foods was becoming a thing. Today we look at a grocery store and we just think it's natural that there would be, almond milk and soy milk and, whole wheat and this and that and, all these alternatives. But, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, that wasn't the case. And those kinds of healthy foods, natural foods, organic foods were just only available in big cities and in smaller niche concept stores. And now, of course, that's been integrated and, natural and organic is part of our mainstream. And that's what we've been pushing. We are really pioneering that conversation. And so that part was also really blowing up. And then at the same time, our bread and butter market, our first early consumers were the immigrants, the Russians that were immigrating. And there was a mass exodus. Millions of people were leaving the Soviet Union as the wall was coming down, and they were being, freed and allowed to leave. And so there was that element working for us too, a market, the Soviets that were immigrating here that already knew what kefir was, that didn't need advertising or marketing. They were at all the delis, and my mom was, key to that distribution. So those were kind of a couple of the elements. And then we just continued to grow as we did more marketing, more PR, more science, more research. That was another piece and a big piece of why we're growing today is science and research that's coming out around the benefits of the microbiome and bacteria. So that's really great to see research in the States, because 30 years ago, there was no research about the gut or bacteria or friendly, or kefir, probiotics. None of that was happening yet. So we kind of really, really have been pushing that conversation. And that's what's growing now. It's the research and marketing and a strong brand with a great story and legacy behind it. So, and delicious taste. I mean, you can't have a product, you can't have anything unless it tastes good.
For sure. That's amazing. So throughout your father's process with Lifeway, you ended up studying at the University of Illinois at Chicago in 1993. I was curious, what did you study there?
Yeah. So actually I had zero interest in business. I thought, that I was going to be a psychologist. I was doing work in trauma and crisis work in Chicago. I was a rape crisis counselor. I worked at the runaway switchboard in Chicago, the National Runaway Switchboard. I did in-home family counseling with kids who've been abused and in the system. And so doing a lot of like community crisis trauma work. And I really had a passion for helping, I don't know, I guess it's cliche to say, but I wanted to change the world or whatever. I think ultimately what I really wanted to do was kind of reduce suffering of people, but also just inspire something, a more healthier way of being. Self-care was really important to me personally. And I think, psychology, I think everything we do kind of goes back to psychology. So, how people make those decisions, good or bad, whether they're working for you or against you, but like, what's that process? How can we inspire people to make more positive lifestyle decisions and choices that kind of lead them to a path of more hopeful, joyful way of living, better in their bodies? Like all of that really made sense to me. And so I don't know. I think the purpose and mission is the same. It's just how I got to it and
Yeah.
my change in it. I thought capitalism was this horrible thing when I was a kid. And, then I started to see, well, capitalism is actually a force for good too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And businesses can be a force for good and can be the best way to help people change. With scale was important too.
Hmm.
I wanted to have scale around this. And I just was listening to my father. After I had already graduated, I was already in grad school, working towards a PhD. And first year into it, I was listening to my dad. Suddenly, I've heard the conversation 1,000 times, but for some reason, it clicked on one particular day when he was talking about, health benefits and how, the gut is kind of the key to all wellness and health. And I just said, you know what? I think I want to leave school and work for my dad and help Lifeway build it. Like, everyone should be drinking kefir. It's not just for the Russian grandmas that I thought he was marketing to, but why aren't more of my friends drinking it? Why isn't everyone I know? Why isn't everyone drinking this? Like, we need to go advertise it. So I started to use those skills that I did learn. I studied advertising and really how it affected dieting behavior and food choices. So how can I use that understanding of psychology that I was really spending time on and apply it to selling this food, selling kefir, selling and raising awareness on probiotics and kefir and Lifeway. And so I left school and I worked with my dad side by side for 5 years. And unfortunately, he had a sudden heart attack at the age of 55, and I was 27 at the time, and I ended up as the CEO. I became the CEO the next day.
Wow.
So that was in 2002, and I've been running
wild.
It almost for 20 years. Yeah, it's been a roller coaster.
Yeah, so at such a young age and taking over that position, what were some of your projected goals for the company there on forward?
Yeah, so at the time we were a $12 million business, revenues of about 12 million. We had about 70 employees. My goal was to sell, more kefir, obviously, to increase our revenues, to grow the business, to grow the conversation, to expand the conversation around more dynamic conversations, really, to talk about what's really, really at the core of like wellness and health, and raise awareness around food insecurity, raise awareness around the environment, sustainability. It was something we were very early on. One of the first things we did was when I became CEO was invest in the green energy and become, I guess, net neutral with our carbon use. So all the energy that we're using, we're putting green energy back on the power grid. That we've been doing that almost 20 years. So, just being able to be good stewards of our process, of manufacturing process, knowing that we're a big part of that piece. But the conversation around probiotics, we were one of the first companies to actually write probiotic on our label. So really raising awareness on gut health, partnering and investing in some of those elements of research around, let's say, lactose intolerance, and, how we can help people make those good food choices that can, make them feel stronger and empowered in their life and go reach for their goals. So today we're about $100+ million company.
Wow.
And growing. And certainly pushed that category and expanded it. We're 97% of a growing category that's growing globally around the world. Certainly during COVID, this conversation even grew exponentially. People really started to understand that they can help their immune system. They can raise their immune system. They can raise their mental health. They can make small investments into the food choices that they make, that they could kind of, that it's not about deprivation and like the 80s, 90s dieting and, be on a starvation diet. That's not health. Fat-free, sugar-free, all those things were taken out of our diets, but it really left us hungry and feeling starved. And I think today what we're really talking about is what we can do to bring, what nourishments we can bring to our diets, and I hate using the word diet, but what we eat. Let's, just what we can do to make ourselves and restore kind of wholeness and wellness. And I just think every investment into, your food choices and your lifestyle is all kind of have big paybacks as you age.
For sure. So looking at Lifeway today, what would you say separates your products from competitors?
Well, our taste is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing everyone loves about Lifeway is how delicious it tastes, how good quality it is, the long legacy behind it and heritage. It's the original,
Yeah.
the story behind it is very special. This brand wasn't created out of a private equity office, and it's still run by, the family. And, I think those are very important, that, we all want to know, where is our food coming from, I think, and we want to support brands that mirror what is important to us. And I think we've been very thoughtful about what that looks like for us, that we are a brand that's, both inspirational and aspirational. And we care deeply about our communities. It's not a transaction for us. It's a bigger conversation, and that we can support countless efforts in communities nationwide is very important to us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, whenever there's been kind of a crisis, whether that be COVID or natural disaster, we've been as forward and thoughtful in how we can aid in that space. But we've done, over 250,000 servings of kefir donated to food pantries and food banks during the COVID crisis.
Wow.
We have a huge percentage of people that are, hungry, food insecure, super concerned about their next meal, especially kids who aren't receiving their lunches for big percentage of kids. They're living in homes where, they were really counting on that meal at lunch. Mm-hmm. So being very thoughtful about those communities and where we can help there, partnering up with some of the greatest organizations. We supported all, hospital healthcare workers and nurses throughout the crisis who maybe couldn't get those quick meals, and just to be able to drink some kefir and get that protein, calcium, vitamin D, probiotics, is really important. So we were really happy that we were able to support there as well. But yeah, the probiotics and the research around our strains are, kefir is just exponentially growing, and it's exciting to be part of that conversation. Yeah. Now more than ever, we're really recognizing how important we are valuing our health. The mm-hmm. whole world shut down because of health. Yeah. And knowing that, our health is linked to each other, that we're not just individual, but it is the collective health. That's never been more apparent than going through a pandemic. So, mm-hmm. it's exciting to know that people care about this. People want to know, they want to make themselves feel better. They want to feel good in their bodies. They want to enjoy their leisure times. They want to move throughout the day with a lightness, with an ease. Sure. So we're part of that. So, yeah.
Amazing. So do you have any idea of what your top seller may be today, product-wise?
Oh, our good old tired and true, plain kefir for the true naturalists. But yeah, plain kefir is still one of our best sellers. And
okay.
That's kind of our big seller. But all the flavors are really delicious, and it's hard to pick one other thing. But
yeah, for sure.
We recently launched lemon and coconut in Whole Foods, and orange, blood orange. It's so good. These flavors are absolutely to die for. And I really love all of our seasonal flavors too. Watermelon is coming out for summer, and we've got pumpkin spice for the fall is so good. Holiday cookie was one of my favorite over the holidays. So it's fun to get into those flavors too. But yeah, it's exciting.
Awesome. So I like to conclude each episode with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, what would that be? Maybe something you've learned or regret? Just anything.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing I always say is love your gut and trust your gut and follow your gut. And, your gut knows. And, practice self-care. It's so, this process of entrepreneurship is a long journey and it's exhausting and it's, you know, stressful. There are moments that will bring you to your knees, and it's exciting, it's fast paced, but taking care of yourself and putting your own oxygen mask on so that you can help take care of others, so that you can shepherd your business, so that you can, watch out for all of the stakeholders. As an entrepreneur, you are really, that's your job, and leading all of the stakeholders. And to be able to do that effectively, you do have to take care of yourself, nourish your body, do things that make you stronger, mentally, physically, spiritually, in all the different facets in your family and your community, assess all those things. But, first you have to take care of yourself, or you won't have reserves to do all the things that you need to do to be successful. So.
For sure. Well, Julie, thank you so much for joining me. And to the listeners
You're so
out there,
welcome.
Yeah, make sure to check out Lifeway Foods at lifewaykefir.com. Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of Starting Small. If you would, leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, follow Starting Small Pod on social platforms to keep up to date on future guests.